Happy Sunday, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Excited for today's topic. It's one that's been on my mind for some time. And it's this question of to what extent it's appropriate for church members to be using government welfare, but more broadly, as an institution, is the church directing its members to participate in government welfare? We all know that Welfare Square here in Salt Lake City is a huge feature that the church touts to show how we take care of our members, and that we have canneries and farms and all these things to take care of members of the church. What is not as widely understood or discussed is the extent to which church members, when they fall into need, are receiving assistance from the government, from taxpayers via the government. So I kind of dug into a little bit of this to figure out some of the history, brush up on what's going on. And I was surprised, as I'll share a little bit later, at some changes in the modern church about the approach towards government welfare. Raises a lot of questions in my mind, but we'll save that for a little bit because first we need a bit of context. So if we go back to the 1930s, the Great Depression, a lot of poverty, a lot of unemployment. And so FDR comes out with the New Deal and all these welfare programs and make work projects to just, give people jobs. And there was heavy spending in Utah. I mean, Utah was a big recipient. Utahns were big recipients, church members specifically, of these federal welfare programs and benefits. So in 1935, the church did a survey trying to assess the needs and the economic status of their members. And they didn't survey every member, but they surveyed just I think like 80,000 plus people, really just trying to get a lot of data. And so what they found in that survey was that of the church members that were surveyed, 18% of them were obtaining relief. So about a fifth of church members needed support. They were not self-sufficient. What's interesting, though, if you break down that 18% of church members who were getting help, only 1.6% of them were getting help from the church. The other 16+% of members who were getting help were getting it from taxpayers via these welfare programs. So at the time, various stakes and wards had their own welfare programs. Some of them would build chapels and other facilities. They would hire, men in the ward who needed work to do that work. But it was a very sporadic approach to welfare. So as a result of that survey and the economic situation and the sporadic nature of the church's approach to welfare, the First Presidency decided to have a church-wide program. So that came in 1936. In 1933, this is from I think the First Presidency. Reported conditions in the state and nation suggest that a considerable burden may rest upon our church relief activities in the near future, while it seems our people may probably look as heretofore for relief assistance from governmental and perhaps other sources. It cannot now certainly be foretold either what or how fully sufficient this assistance will be. We must therefore prepare ourselves to meet the necessities that may fall upon us. No one must be permitted to starve or freeze in our midst. So the First Presidency starts to turn an eye toward centralizing this, towards creating kind of a common approach to welfare. I gotta shut my door now because my dog came in. And so the First Presidency wanted to kind of step in. And what's interesting is even FDR is starting to realize the problems with direct payments, with direct welfare, with directly funding people. He even said that the dole, the direct payment of welfare, the dole, was contributing to spiritual and moral disintegration. It's a very fascinating thing for even FDR to admit, since he was the instigator of so many of these welfare programs. So in 1936, then, as a result of him saying, hey, let's not do this direct dole, this direct welfare anymore, the direct payments stopped. The feds instead started pushing a lot of welfare down to state and local governments. And so, at the time, the legislature was mostly comprised of church members, still is. Here's a little snippet from a historian. He says, aware that the local governments in Utah and surrounding states were not in a position to assume a large burden of this nature, the welfare, the church established a security program to assure that at least its own faithful members were taken care of. The sequence of events at the time of its establishment makes it clear that the church security program was essentially a reaction to the prospective curtailment of federal relief each time there was uncertainty as to the amount and extent of federal relief assistance. So then the church comes out with its own welfare program. Again, there was this kind of sporadic approach to how welfare was being done. 1936, the first presidency announces, hey, we're going to have this single welfare plan. And a couple years later, when they were explaining what they had done, this is why they said that they had done a welfare plan. Our primary purpose, the first presidency said, was to set up a system under which the curse of idleness would be done away with, the evils of the dole abolished. A dole, again, is a welfare payment or charity. The evils of the dole abolished, or dependence, direct payments, direct welfare. So the evils of the dole abolished, and independence, industry, thrift, and self-respect be once more established amongst our people. Work is to be re-enthroned as the ruling principle of the lives of our church members. So that was 1936. And for a long time in the church leaders sang that same tune, that the dole was evil, that we shouldn't be dependent upon others, that we shouldn't be using government programs, that we need to be self-reliant, self-sustaining, thrifty, independent, and so forth. So I have a few quotes. I've got a lot of quotes. I'll share only a few, though, to illustrate kind of this consistent theme. So Victor Brown in General Conference in 1968, he said, after a very careful personal investigation, this is when the bishop is talking to someone who needs help, the bishop decides whether the church should render assistance. If he decides that it should, the assistance will be limited to the necessities of life and only as long as it takes to get the family back on its feet. The bishop is not elected to bail us out of financial difficulty caused by poor management of our affairs. If he gives assistance, he will expect us to work for it if we are physically able. His motive here is to help us maintain our self-respect by not accepting a dole. Frankly, many times it would be much easier for the bishop, to give a dole. But he recognizes the dole as an evil, and it is his desire to bless us with the program, not weaken us. So this is 3 decades after the welfare plan has been announced and implemented, and President Brown, I think, or maybe it's Elder, was making clear that the approach of the bishops was to encourage independence and self-reliance, to discourage dependence and the dole. Howard W. Hunter, just 7 years later, this is 1975, there are several principles which undergird the significance of work in the Lord's plan. First, as the covenant people, we must be as self-sufficient as possible. We are to be free from dependence upon a dole or any program that might endanger our free agency. Second, we must work to support the families with which the Lord has blessed us. So again, the dole is evil. We shouldn't be dependent on it. It can endanger our agency. 2 years later, Ezra Taft Benson says, occasionally we receive questions as to the propriety of church members receiving government assistance instead of church assistance. Let me restate what is a fundamental principle. Individuals, he says, to the extent possible, should provide for their own needs. Where the individual is unable to care for himself, his family should assist. Where the family is not able to provide, the church should render assistance, not the government. And so this was, for decades, the pattern of church welfare. First the individual, then immediate and extended family, and then the church. None of that should be a shock. That's the church we grew up with. That's how it was. It's not how it is today, which we'll get to in just a minute. 1980, so shortly after that, Marion G. Romney. When circumstances combine to require help, it is church doctrine that one rely upon his family for assistance. Obviously, no one should become a charge upon the public when his relatives are able to care for him. In other words, again, the government comes later, go to your family first, and then as Benson said, the church would come in after that. Here's Marion G. Romney, again, just 2 years later. He says, the practice of coveting and receiving unearned benefits, in other words, the dole or welfare payments, has now become so fixed in our society that even men of wealth, possessing the means to produce more wealth, are expecting the government to guarantee them a profit. Elections often turn on what the candidates promise to do for voters from government funds. This practice, if universally accepted and implemented in any society, will make slaves of its citizens. We cannot afford to become wards of the government, even if we have a legal right to do so. So again, like just because you supposedly have this government benefit or this ability to get welfare doesn't mean that you should. J. Richard Clark, General Conference, same year, 1982. The individual is all important in the Lord's plan. Any system which does not require initiative, self-reliance, and the necessity of work for what we receive, if able, will not preserve its integrity. The design of the welfare plan of the church is to abolish the dole. The dole is a blight in any welfare system and should be feared as cancer in the human body. Pretty strong words. Oh gosh, okay, let's do, I'll end, last quote here, Gordon B. Hinckley, 1990, in the first presidency message of the Ensign. As government increasingly assumes the burden of caring for all human needs, the independence of our social services and the doctrine which lies behind that position will become more and more important. In other words, it's very important that we focus on the independence of our welfare program and the doctrine that supports that, because the state is just continuing to grow and trying to be all things to all people. So then I thought, okay, those are interesting quotes. Most of them I'd heard before when I studied this issue in the past. But what has been the official position of the church from a welfare situation? So I went to the Handbook. First, I went to some past handbooks. So here's from 1980. This is in the Welfare Services Resource Handbook that the church officially used to kind of lay out the plan of welfare. So 1980. Latter-day Saints are encouraged not to accept unearned government assistance. If an individual accepts unearned government assistance, he may not accept church commodity or financial assistance at the same time. So you're basically ruling yourself out of getting church welfare help if you are on the dole, if you're getting these welfare payments from the government. Then it continues, no true Latter-day Saint, while physically or emotionally able, will voluntarily shift the burden of his own or his family's well-being to someone else. So long as he can, under the inspiration of the Lord and with his own labors, he will work to the extent of his ability to supply himself and his family with the spiritual and temporal necessities of life. As guided by the Spirit of the Lord and through applying these principles, each member of the church should make his own decisions as to what assistance he accepts, be it from government or other sources. In this way, independence, self-respect, dignity, and self-reliance will be fostered and free agency maintained. So making clear you shouldn't be on both the government dole and church welfare at the same time. You're disqualifying yourself from church help if you do, nevertheless saying you have agency, and so if you want to pursue assistance from government or other sources, that is your opportunity to do so. So that was 1980. Then I found from 1999 the church's General Handbook. They, of course, update this periodically, and it's hard to find older copies, but I did find some on the interwebs. So here is from the 1999 Church General Handbook as it pertains to welfare. It says, and you'll, as I read these, you'll start to notice a shift. So it says, through the church, the Lord has established a way to care for the poor and needy and to help them regain their self-reliance. When church members are doing all they can to provide for themselves, but still cannot meet their basic needs, they should first turn to their families for help. When this is not sufficient, the church stands ready to help. So here we are in 1999, decades later, and the pattern of the church, the welfare program, is still help yourself, ask for help from your family and extended relatives, and then the church is there ready to help. That's the order, even in still 1999. It continues, the bishop is entrusted with the sacred responsibility of using church funds and commodities to care for the poor and needy members of the ward. He provides welfare assistance to accomplish the following objectives. Number one, help members become self-reliant and stand independent of all welfare assistance, regardless of its source. So get off the dole, get off welfare, right? Independence. Number two, help members become stronger spiritually and learn to provide for others. So have more of an abundance mindset, independent, be able to help others, not just be the one in need. Number three, build integrity, self-respect, dignity, and soundness of character in each person who receives help. And then this. When deciding what welfare assistance to give, the bishop determines whether members are receiving assistance from government or other sources. Bishops should be careful not to duplicate welfare assistance. So 2 decades earlier, 1980, this hard line saying if you're on getting government welfare, you don't get church welfare. Okay. Here we are 2 decades later, 1999, and now it's a little bit more permissively saying, well, when the bishop is deciding whether or what welfare assistance to give, the bishop should determine whether the members are receiving government assistance or other assistance and don't duplicate, which maybe still implies, hey, if you're on government welfare, we're not going to help you too, because then we're kind of duplicating it. So come to us if you're no longer getting government help. So in that sense, perhaps the policy hasn't changed. It's just a little bit softer. What's critical, though, to observe about what I just read, actually, you know what? I'm gonna hang on to that for just 2 minutes, and then we'll make the comparison. Okay, so we go from 1980 to 1999. Now I found the next one in 2010. Here's a snippet. I've got the section numbers documented, but you don't need that. It says, leaders may assist, this is talking about ward leaders, elders quorum, relief society president, everybody else. Leaders may assist the bishop when he refers members to church welfare operations, such as bishop's storehouses, church employment resource centers, Deseret Industries, LDS Family Services. Leaders may also help members receive assistance through community and government agencies. So here we are in 2010, and now we see, and maybe it was in there a few years earlier, I just couldn't find, one of these until 2010. But now it's saying, oh, hey, church members, go ahead and help support and help your fellow church members go get government assistance. It's okay for you to do so. So now we're kind of putting the church in the middle of an individual trying to get on the dole and get government welfare. Which all brings us now to 2020. From what I understand, the last kind of significant update to the handbook, they've done little amendments here and there, but the online version, the copyright is 2020. So this is what you can go Google yourself and find in the current handbook. So I'm going to read a little bit, and then we'll contrast it to some of the examples that we were just reading a moment ago. Okay, so it says, all the resources available to the church to help those with temporal needs are called the Lord's storehouse. Well, of course, initially, the Lord's storehouse, the bishop's storehouse, was literally a storehouse. It was, eggs and carrots and, jerky and all kinds of stuff that you would actually go deposit, and you would tithe. If you had a farm, you would, contribute not just money, but actual products. And so now what the handbook is saying is we're using the term storehouse in a very abstract, vague sense, because it's, everyone's just donating money now. So these include members' offerings of time, talents, compassion, materials, financial resources. Leaders can often help individuals find solutions to their needs by drawing on the knowledge, skills, and service offered by ward and stake members. What I like about that is it's not just the money, right? It's networking connections, it's job opportunities, it's training, it's emotional support. Like there's so many ways to help beyond just, give me money or give me eggs or whatever. So I like that. And then it says, besides the resources of the Lord's storehouse, members can often receive needed help through government and community resources. This reference to government welfare in a very positive context, right? There's no discouragement. There's no like, hey, be careful about, duplication of welfare benefits or whatever. Now it's just like, members can often receive help through the government. Hint, hint. And then it continues further down below. Members strive to meet their basic needs through their own efforts and help from extended families. So remember the pattern for decades, right? Individual, family, church. And here it's just saying you strive to meet your own needs, individual, and through help from extended family. Family, number 2. Okay, so church should be next, right? Well, the manual says, when this is insufficient, members may need help from other sources, such as, number 1, government and community resources, and then number 2, church assistance. Now, you might say, the order doesn't matter, it's not alphabetical because that doesn't work either. Maybe there's some other reason. They were like, I'm sorry, but no, I think the order of this is intentional. I think that it was put this way for a reason. And so now the pattern has been changed. Now it is individual, family, government, and church, and almost kind of blended because, again, earlier, leaders may go help church members go get government welfare, and so there's a little bit of a blurring. But I was shocked to see government and community resources put first before church assistance. So then it continues. Again, this is the 2020 manual. Before providing church assistance, the bishop reviews with members what resources they are using to meet their own needs. This person, the bishop, may suggest other resources for the members to consider, including resources in the government or community. So now the bishop is meeting with an individual in need, and before providing church assistance, you're doing this review, and the bishop may, again, wink, wink, hint, hint, the bishop may encourage them to go obtain government resources, welfare, the dole. It's not saying go provide church assistance, and if that is insufficient, help them figure out what other options they have. Now it's saying before even church assistance, you can suggest government-based resources. Wow. Okay, final part to share from the handbook. In many areas, members have access to government or community resources that help with basic needs. Such resources may include healthcare assistance, food assistance, job training and placement services, mental health services, education programs, senior assistance programs, housing assistance, etc. Members are encouraged to explore these resources in addition to resources provided by the church. What a shift, right? I mean, do you sense the shift? To me, this is a big shift. The evils of the dole are no longer touted. I mean, if you go look through all like the general conference addresses and stuff, it kind of stopped in the 80s. You don't really see that anymore. The welfare state has grown to such a degree that people are used to it. They accept it. They're willing to concede that it's normal. I was looking up here on my bookshelf. I have a book up here somewhere that I've got it right here. Bear with me, because this is a good book. All right. I've written about this a little bit before. So this is a fascinating book, From Mutual Aid to the Welfare State. Sorry, that's probably showing up backwards for you people watching the video. This book is all about fraternal societies from 1890 to 1967. And to summarize the book, what it talks about is how in the early days of America, there was a proliferation of charitable, voluntary, often church-based welfare programs and support systems. And that as the welfare state grew, as FDR leaned in with the New Deal, the government crowded out the charitable, their competition, if you will. They crowded them out because it was no longer viable for individuals to rely on and participate in private voluntary associations when they could be like, well, I pay taxes, and so I might as well get what's coming to me, right? And what's interesting about it, after the New Deal was introduced, the church welfare, not just our church, but churches in general, church welfare spending fell by 30% in the immediate aftermath of the New Deal. And so, again, this is Christ versus Caesar, right? This is competition between God's way and Satan's way. And these welfare programs, these taxation-based welfare programs are so wrong for so many reasons. I'll get into a scripture or two in just a minute. But what I want to mention is that I sense here a big shift in how the church policy has approached welfare. It's almost like a given now that you should go take advantage of government welfare programs and then go bother the church. Like, hey, if that's not working for you, or if it's not enough or whatever, then maybe we can spot you. But go to the government first. And so the church is now, in a sense, complicit in growing the welfare state by directing everybody there, and also complicit in shifting the mindset of the members away from independence and self-reliance in industry to dependence and to, welfare statism. And hey, I pay taxes too, so I should go benefit from it. And this cycle, this Ponzi scheme, right? Where it's like, well, I benefited from it. I had to pay into it, so I better get what's coming to me, right? And where does it end? And where went the doctrine and the church welfare plan and the principle of, the church and members voluntarily helping one another rather than telling people to just go suck at the teat of the state? Where did all that go? So charity, in my mind, the whole reason why welfare is important is it's this idea of mutual reciprocity. I remember I went to Africa 15, 16 years ago on a service project. And as I was preparing for that, I was raising money and learning all about what we were going to be doing. And I was reading about charity in the scriptures. And I came across this scripture that I had never really understood this way before. But when I read it in that context, I was amazed at how true welfare is like this book calling it mutual aid, these mutual aid societies. It was about people helping one another and not just this state in the middle. And so this scripture, it's 2 Corinthians 8, 13 and 14. So here's Paul talking, and he says, "For I mean not that other men be eased and ye burdened, but by an equality. Now at this time your abundance may be a supply for their want, that their abundance also may be a supply for your want, that there may be equality." So in the context of, at the time that I kind of had this aha moment, here I was, this, white dude going to Africa to go, build an orphanage and do a bunch of stuff. And, I'm relatively, by comparison, especially prosperous and financially comfortable and able to, bring supplies and money and things to these people that we were going to serve. And so I had a so-called abundance. So here Paul is saying, at this time, your abundance may be a supply for their want. But then it says, their abundance also may be a supply for your want. Which, if you've ever, I served my mission in Honduras, some of the poorest people on the planet, these tiny little crap villages of just dirt everywhere and just, shanty homes and just awful situations for a lot of these people. And they had an abundance that I had lacked, just as these orphans that we played with in Africa did. And so here I was bringing of my abundance for their want, but they had an abundance to share with me for my want of just happiness and joy and deep spirituality and gratitude to God for lives that were a massive challenge temporally compared to my own, and yet they were grateful. And so that became an abundance to help with the supply of my want. My dog just came in again. And so that scripture to me at the time was fascinating because I started to realize that charity isn't just about giving out money. It isn't just about helping other people. It's a reciprocal act. And that is the evil of the dole. The evil of the welfare state is that the state positions itself in the middle. Sure, they take your money through taxes and they print a ton more. But the money that they give out to the individual is not coming from any person. If I get charity, if I get help, financial help from let's say my mom or a brother or a neighbor, or a ward member, that rule of reciprocity kicks in. I want to help back. I want to, if I'm not paying it back, I'm going to pay it forward. I feel a sense of accountability and connection and gratitude. And every time I'm around them, I'm expressing this and I'm reiterating how grateful I am. I'm using those funds prudently and not trying to squander what I've been given because I know it was a sacrifice for this person in my life, right? That is where charity can really be leveraged to go a long way. And you get these deeper societal bonds. You strengthen social fabric when people are coming together to help one another. But when the state does it, you don't have any of that. You have social atomization. Everyone is disconnected from one another. The giver and the receiver, it's not even a giver. It's someone from whom it was taken, right? And the receiver, they don't know one another. The person getting the dole has no compunction about, blowing money on whatever. I just saw someone post on Twitter this morning how on Amazon she was looking at her Starbucks coffee pods, some high-end little whatever, and it said right there on the Amazon page, like SNAP funds or WIC funds or whatever welfare program, can be used. And it's like, these welfare programs are just funding these lifestyles of people with their Netflix subscriptions and cell phones for everyone in the house and all these things. And people do not use that money in the same way that they would if they knew the person that was responsible for giving it to them. And so they're squandering and, using all this money unnecessarily, and their abundance is not supplying anyone else's want because the state has come in and kind of separated things in the middle. And so that, I think, is a big challenge with the welfare system's approach. So I wrote about this in Christ versus Caesar, and I quoted from the book I just read, from this Mutual Aid to the Welfare State. And it was so fascinating to me when I was doing research on this to see how proliferate, how these organizations, these mutual aid societies, had just proliferated anywhere. I mean, tens of millions of people, and so many of these people were doing it for religious purposes because they wanted to fulfill their charge as Christians. They wanted to follow God's commandments. So here's a little bit from the book. Let me close the door here again. So it says, charity declines as the obligation is outsourced to the corrupt and inefficient state. Private philanthropy is crowded out by Caesar, for it is extremely difficult, if not economically untenable, to compete against an institution that asserts the power to compel everyone to assist. And so as charity became as cold as the payment of taxes, Caesar's counterfeit undermined the ennobling aspects of charity. People felt and feel today like they're sufficiently supportive of the poor among them because they're taxed for that alleged purpose. And in the process, they become a mere bystander, a mere spectator to helping the poor. Christians are lulled into charitable inaction by believing that their obligation to help the poor is satisfied through Caesar. So, to me, it's a concern that the church, which architected a welfare plan, which is the envy of many organizations and governments and everybody else for its efficiency, its effectiveness, its elevation of the importance of work and self-reliance, that it's not to fund lifestyles, it's all designed to get people back on their feet so that they can have the dignity of providing for themselves. And so why would we not, as a church, lean into that? Why would we not 10x that? Why would we not teach about the welfare plan and the model of individual, family, and church? Why would we not encourage more donations, more charity through the church, more beyond just paying money, right? Again, like the quote earlier said, that it could be emotional support, networking support, training and educational support. I mean, I even think of like back in the day, church members used to build their own church buildings. My mom helped build a brick chapel house in Michigan growing up back in the 60s or 70s, and this was common. And now all that's been outsourced. And now it's all standardized and disconnected. We just send money in and we don't get the participation. We don't get the investment. We don't get the social bonding that comes. And so the more that we systematize these things and outsource these things, we're losing the social benefit that so much of it brings. And I think it's the same thing with welfare. When bishops, according to the Handbook, are encouraged to suggest government welfare, when government welfare comes first before church assistance, when members are encouraged to explore government welfare resources, we have completely moved away from what Benson and others called a fundamental principle. So where is the doctrinal shift? Has there been a new revelation? Has there been some new, by common consent, everyone raising their hand saying, yep, let's abandon the old ways and let's, just encourage everyone to, get what they can from Caesar, and then maybe the church will help out after that, Like when and why did this change happen? I don't know. It clearly happened sometime in the past 2 decades. Because again, going back to that 1999 handbook, remember it says, when deciding what welfare assistance to give, the bishop determines whether members are receiving assistance from government or other sources. Bishops should be careful not to duplicate welfare assistance. At no point in 99 was it saying bishops should mention or encourage or leaders should go out and help get government assistance. It just said, when you as a bishop are reviewing what assistance they're getting, double check if they're getting any government assistance so that you don't duplicate any welfare. So it's a passive thing. The bishop is not involved actively in that process at all. The handbook just wanted bishops to double check and say, hey, are you getting anything? And let's factor that into the equation of how the church is going to help. But now bishops are put in the middle of encouraging members. Members themselves are encouraged to go explore government resources. Government and community resources are put above church assistance. So I would love to know when and why this changed. Because if there's been a doctrinal shift, I think that's worthy of remark. I think that's worthy of our attention. If this is the slow creep of statism in the modern church, if it's the degradation of our doctrine and the abandonment of these fundamental principles through just these little bureaucratic policy changes and stuff, that needs even more attention, perhaps, right? Because are we undermining past revelation or at least wisdom for reasons? What reasons? Because most church members do just go get government welfare because it's what everyone else is doing, because there's so many programs, why not take advantage of them? Because we tried to tell the church members not to use it and they didn't listen. So now we'll just, like so many prophets throughout the Book of Mormon, just, settle and give them what they want and God will no longer give them the higher law. Like, I don't know why, and I don't know when, and I don't know who made these changes, but the changes are very stark and significant. And if they are bureaucratic and these policy changes or I don't know what, this is going to have, I think, huge social ramifications. I mean, we were just reading in the New Testament today at church, and at the end of the lesson, we were talking about no man can serve 2 masters, which, by the way, I dedicate quite a bit of ink to in Christ versus Caesar, because I feel like which we did today in church, we just breezed through that scripture, and we don't really consider its ramifications in a political and economic context. What does it mean to not serve mammon or to serve the state or Caesar or Satan in a political and economic context? Not just religious, right? But everything. And there are so many implications, I think, if we're not going to serve, if we're not going to serve Caesar. And yet, so many people are gleefully taking advantage of Caesar's welfare programs. I think this causes our church culture great harm. I think it does a disservice to the doctrine of the past to not at least be frank and open and direct with what changed and why. It's just these tiny little things in the handbook that now bishops are going to go implement, and it's going to change the attitude of the leadership and the Relief Society presidents and others that are just going to slowly start doing things differently and encourage more and more and more dependence upon the state. And so now we're saying go on the dole, and then if you still need help, come call us at the church. I have deep concerns with this and, frankly, a lot of curiosity, because other than being able to kind of spot check some of these handbooks, I can't really make sense of what changed or why. So, be curious what you think. Leave me a comment, and I'd love to know if you have any insights on this, because I'm kind of scratching my head at how and why this changed, when for decades, and even before the welfare plan, this was kind of the approach. It was just never centralized under the church. It was a sporadic local thing, because again, those storehouses, you didn't want to transport chicken eggs 300 miles away. So the storehouses were all local. Welfare was local. So for generations, it was individual, family, church. So I'm very curious if anyone knows why and when it changed, because to me, it's very clear that it did, and I'm very worried about what that means. Off to LA for a few days. Hope you guys have a great week. I got a fun topic next week. So if you haven't yet, I'd love a review on your favorite podcast app. I'm actually, at my brother's suggestion, going to create, I think, a little website where people can more easily start searching through these Sunday musings and finding different topics just to surface them a bit more. So I'll be working on that over the next few days. Fun little web project. I used to be a web developer way back in the day, so it's fun to still be able to poke at little projects like that and have some fun. So stay tuned. I'll announce that website if and when I get it up and running, in case it's helpful for people to go find past podcasts on various topics that they're curious about. So again, love a review. Grateful for all of you listening. And again, in the comments, if you have any insights on this particular topic, I'd be very curious to learn from you. Have a good week.